Hey guys, welcome back to the Always Football Podcast. My name is Cameron. Alongside me is my co-host Alex. Alex, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great tonight, Cameron. Looking forward to this podcast.
Yeah, man, I am too. Yeah, we got a good podcast for y'all. I mean, we had an amazing week of football this past week, and there's a lot of topics we want to discuss. Going into the first one right away, let's talk about that Texans team. I mean, we watched them go against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are a pretty decent roster, like stacked up wise. And you got the Golden Boy, the number one overall pick, Trevor Lawrence, expected to be one of the greatest prospects of all time. And this Texans team went out and win. So, Alex, my question is, after this big Texans win, how confident are we in Houston moving forward?
For me, Cameron, I'll be honest with you. I am not. I'm still not confident in the Texans. I'm just more confident in the fact that Trevor Lawrence wasn't as ready as everyone predicted him to be. Uh, we did see a lot of good things from Houston. Obviously, their secondary was pretty lights out. They were pretty shut down. They forced 3 turnovers on Trevor. They picked him off 3 times, which, by the way, was the amount of picks they had all of last season. They also did have They did apply a lot of pressure on Trevor as well. I looked up few stats before this podcast, so I'm more well prepared. Looks like they forced 16 quarterback pressures on 56 passing snaps. So really, Trevor was under fire the whole game. So that was a positive. Really, you're looking at a strong Texans defense to start off the year, but I don't think it's sustainable. We did see their offense struggle a bit. Tyrod was good, but the scoreline was flattering to that Texans offense. Their run game was pretty below average. They only totaled 3.2 yards per carry throughout that three-headed monster running back system they have there with David Johnson, Mark Ingram, and Philip Lindsay. They didn't do all that much on the ground. And yeah, I think that that division is still, you still have the two front runners in Indianapolis and Tennessee. I think they're going to run away with the division no matter what. I don't think this game changes much.
I know I agree with you to say about Tennessee and Indianapolis, running away with this division. But when it comes to like how confident I am in this Texans team, listen, I picked them to win week one, and I had a little bit more faith. I feel like a good amount more faith in this team than a lot of people do. And I'm going to continue with that. You know, this wasn't a small win. It was a pretty big win against a decent Jaguars defense. You look at Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks is such an underrated receiver, and he looked just as good as he did back when he was with New Orleans. I mean, 5 receptions for 132 yards, including that one catch. It was like 52 yards down the field where he mossed a man. I mean, he was looking on fire, and his quarterback, Tyrod Taylor. I mean, it's hard not to talk about that. Like Brandon Cooks, he looked like he did on his former team. He looked like he was still on the Buffalo Bills, and he still looked young. I mean, he was moving around with lots of speed without a problem. 21 for 33 with 291 yards and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Um, this is a very, very good Tyrod Taylor, and that's definitely something to be excited about. And you brought up the run game, but I actually was very happy with the run game. I wouldn't consider it a three-headed monster. I didn't really throw David Johnson in there too much, but I mean, you looked at Ingram; he was finding these holes and he was making these big plays. And then for Philip Lindsay, besides that fumble he had at the beginning of the game, but the drop pass, he looked great. I mean, he was very, very fast, which is something we already knew how fast Lindsay was. But I mean, he was zipping through without a problem. He just looked plain out unstoppable. And if you want to call it a three-headed monster for the running game, bring up Tyrod Taylor. Because like I said, Tyrod Taylor looked younger than ever. He looked better than ever. I mean, he was running all over that defense like it was nothing, and I enjoyed watching every second of it. But I mean, it wasn't just that offense that was looking great. You brought up the defense, so I'm going to bring up the defense. They, from all the film I was watching and actually watching the game, Trevor Lawrence had zero time to throw. And yes, this is a weaker Jacksonville Jaguars O-line, but they have improved it. And it just didn't look like it was that improved. And then you look at the secondary, they had 3 interceptions. Now, the only credit I'll give to the Jaguars here is that, like, really only one of those picks was luck. I say one of those three picks that was lucky. It was a bad throw by Trevor Lawrence, a big overthrow, and it just landed in the hands of a Texans secondary. But the two of the picks were just amazing plays on the ball by the Texans secondary. This was way better of a game than I expected them to play, even with me hyping them up. I have a lot of faith and confidence in this Texans team moving forward, and I think they'll be great for the rest of the season.
Yeah, you're one of the very few, Cameron, with that Texans team. I'll be honest, but I'm glad you're confident in them. Sticking with one of the good games of the week and another pair of teams that I'd like to discuss. Let's jump into that Packers Saints games. That Packers Saints game. We obviously saw a lot from both sides, and from my point of view, it was not at all what I expected. But Cameron, going forward for both teams, what did that game mean to them?
Similar to the Texans-Jaguars game, once again, I was right. I think the Saints were going to best the Packers here, but the one thing I was not right about is I did not think it was going to be a blowout. That Packers team just did not look like last year's team. And a lot of people are putting all the blame on Aaron Rodgers. But if you ask me, it's not all Rodgers' fault. From watching the film and watching the game and doing some little bit of studying, really his wide receivers were just not getting open. They were struggling to, just beat this Saints secondary, and that was a big struggle. But some of it is Rodgers' fault. This man won MVP last year, and then he went 15 for 28 with 133 yards and 2 interceptions, a 13.4 QBR. You can have a higher QBR if you take every snap and spike it on the ground for the entire game. So it was just an awful game for him, but it really seemed like an awful game for the entire offense. The O-line, too. The O-line struggled to put up blocks for Aaron Rodgers, and this is an O-line that people were considering top 3 last year. And, it was just falling apart like a Nature Valley bar. It just could not stay together. It was definitely just hard to watch. And, on the other side of things, we're talking about the Saints. I really hyped up this Saints team. I think when we did our predictions, I had them 5th seed, 6th seed.
Yep.
Either way, I had them in the playoffs. I love this Saints team. And I felt like they were strong on both sides of the ball. The offense looked just as strong, if not stronger, than it did last season. Winston looked the best I think he's ever looked in his career. Maybe during that 8-8 season with Tampa, his last season with them, he might have looked pretty good. But I loved watching this game. It was only 198 yards, I believe, but it was 14 for 20 with 5 passing touchdowns. That's an amazing game at that. And you look at Kamara, 91 total yards with a receiving touchdown, 83 of those rushing yards. So usually you see Kamara more involved on the pass, but this game he didn't need to be involved for the pass with Jameis Winston to be elite. Kamara did what a running back's job is, and he ran, and he did a really good job. A really good job of it. And then on the other side of the ball, the defense. Really was just shutting down Aaron Rodgers, like I brought up. None of his receivers could get open because this team was locking them up. They had 2 sacks, they had 4 pass deflections, 7 QB hits, and 2 interceptions. This team, all together, looked absolutely amazing. I think it could be a fight for the division after watching this, and I love getting way overhyped after week 1 games, but I don't think that's what this is. I think this Saints team just proved to us that they're not going to be bad without their starting guy, Drew Brees. They're not going to struggle this season, and they proved that against the former MVP, the reigning MVP, and a team that went to the NFC Championship game. So, yeah, I think that's what we're looking at with both of these teams, Alex.
So, from what I heard from you, it sounds like you're still very high on the Saints, obviously, and it sounds like to me that you think that they're in contention to be, Super Bowl contenders this year. But I just don't see it yet, in all honesty. Yes, they did look really good against the reigning Super Bowl reigning MVP, sorry. Jameis was good in his role. You did mention his 5 touchdown passes, but you also said he threw under 200 yards. So that role that he had in Tampa Bay, and then now translating over to New Orleans, it's a completely different role. He's kind of going for more. It's more, throw to the open guy. It's not, show how good of a quarterback you are making these crazy throws. So it was just it's a different role for him, and I think that made him look better than he is. In all honesty, I will say that defense is very, very good. They were a lot better than what I expected them to be coming into the season. That secondary was ridiculous, and then Marshawn Lattimore right after the game got an extension, a well-deserved extension. So I will say that. But I think this game more lies on what went wrong with the Packers. You said Rodgers was what was the QBR he had?
13.4.
Right. So I mean, it was an abysmal game from Aaron. I mean, let's just be honest. He did absolutely nothing. He looked awful. The whole offseason antics, the nonsense we had with that Packers organization and him, it just showed. They weren't prepared. They came into that game as the less prepared football team. They were not as synced as that Saints team. It's as simple as that. Your proclaimed top wide receiver in the league last year, Devontae Adams, he made no impact. He wasn't getting open. Marshawn shut him out of that game. That Saints defense, that Saints secondary shut him out of that game. He only came up with 5 catches for 56 yards. So, I think it just plays into how little Green Bay was prepared for this game. And I think it just says a lot about what they did this offseason with Aaron and Devontae. They want to turn this around. They better get to work, because that was an awful game for them.
Yeah, no, I agree. One thing I will say off of that is I'm not claiming the Saints to be Super Bowl competitors. I think that they can compete with this division. But yeah, no, under Jameis Winston, I don't know how far you go in the playoffs. Moving on to my next question. We definitely saw some really good games. We saw some really good teams, including a big shocking win. I mean, a blowout for the Cardinals against the Tennessee Titans. So, I mean, that offense looked great. That defense looked great. Alex, after week 1, can we consider this Cardinals team a Super Bowl contender?
Absolutely. I think there's no doubt. You just held, in my opinion, the best offense in the league, and a lot of people's opinions, best offense in the league, to 13 points. I watched that full game, and I thought I was watching the Atlanta Falcons. I thought I was watching them on 2 separate screens playing against, the Eagles and the Cardinals. Don't get me started with that. It was ridiculous. That offense looked awful. And yes, this Cardinals team is an absolute contender after that win. You held the four-headed monster of Tannehill, A.J. Brown, Julio, and Derrick Henry to, what was it? Or no, sorry, forget Tannehill. You held Henry, Julio, and A.J. Brown to, where are my numbers here? 155 total yards altogether and 1 touchdown in 4 quarters. That is 3 all-pro players that could be considered all-pro players in their positions, and you held them to 155 yards and a touchdown in a 4-quarter game. That just says it alone. But yeah, I mean, let's just talk about their defense for just 1 second. Chandler Jones, he was unstoppable. He had 5 sacks himself. That's unheard of. You don't have one guy coming in for 5 sacks off the edge on that good of a football team. So yeah, that was ridiculous. Their entire defense was incredible. Tannehill was just he didn't have any time in the pocket. It was just a mess for the Titans, and that Cardinals defense showed that they're probably they might just be a top 5 defense coming into this year. But then let's talk about their offense. The Cardinals offense. Kyler, I mean, gosh, he was running around making plays. He was just escaping, evading. He was untouchable. He was electric. He was just, he got out of the pocket. He looks downfield, and he just makes these unbelievable plays. Patrick Mahomes type plays. I mean, after that week, you could just, he must have put so much work in this offseason to get where he is right now, because that was pretty impressive. That was pretty awesome to watch from Kyler. And then of course you had Hopkins being Hopkins. He caught another 2 touchdown passes, and their whole receiving core really was really strong. Even their backfield, Chase Edmonds and James Conner, those two guys held their own. And man, what a game from the Cardinals. And yes, they are absolutely Super Bowl contenders.
Yeah, Alex, I'm gonna have to agree with you there, man. I'm a big fan of this Cardinals team as a Super Bowl contender. You look at DeAndre Hopkins. He looked the same as ever. I mean, maybe even better. The skill level, just the play style was just absolutely amazing. That first drive of the game, he had a man on his butt just getting around him. DeAndre Hopkins has just not declined at all, and he's looking, I mean, as good as he can, making these absolutely just unbelievable catches. He went 6 receptions for 83 yards and 2 touchdowns. DeAndre Hopkins was definitely a huge key factor in this game, and he's going to be one for the rest of the season. But it's hard to ignore what the quarterback did, Kyler Murray. I mean, he looked fast. He looked very elusive, kind of like what you were talking about, and he was so good at avoiding the sack. I believe that O-line was falling apart a good bit, and somehow, some way, he was getting out of there, rolling out, and making these deep throws. He had really good reads, and he had really on-target throws, even in the smallest pocket. I watched him fit a couple throws in a double coverage, maybe even triple coverage. You have 3 men around him, so he was making good throws. 21 for 32, 289 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown. I mean, that's just numbers for a quarterback that was unstoppable. You look on the defensive side of things, Chandler Jones, very, very quick. I mean, he probably looked about as fast as Kyler Murray. He was getting around that O-line without a problem, and just getting to the quarterback. 5 sacks, man. That's an insane game for anybody. But Chandler Jones doing it, I mean, it just got to excite you if you're a Cardinals fan. The only downside I have for this Cardinals team is the secondary. I really did feel like there was a lot of struggling. I mean, when I watched the film and I watched, the actual game and how it went, there was a lot of guys getting wide open on simple moves, and a lot of their luck came from dropped passes. So, if I'm a Cardinals fan, that's the thing I'm mainly concerned about is this secondary going to be able to slow down guys like Tyreek Hill or stop guys like Stephon Diggs or Devontae Adams? I mean, you stopped A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, I mean, which is an amazing wide receiver duo. But those two aren't the best of the best. I mean, there's definitely going to be struggling going forward with that. But I definitely agree with that Cardinals team being a Super Bowl competitor.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Definitely an incredible game by Arizona. So let's stop discussing the teams and let's get into a bit of rookie discussion. Everybody's excited to see their team's first round pick, or if you didn't have a first round pick, you had a second round pick. Anyway, whatever draft pick you had, you're excited to see one of your rookies take the field for your team for the first time. And just saying that, Cameron, which rookies were you which rookie were you most impressed with, and then which one was the most underwhelming this opening week?
Yeah, man, I'm going to start with the most underwhelming. I was very high on this guy, and I think a lot of fantasy guys were high on this guy, but Najee Harris, man, had 16 carries for 45 yards, which averages out to be 2.8 yards per carry. His longest was an 18-yarder, and he had another 10-yarder on top of that. So that's 28 on 2 carries, leaving 14 carries for just a very, very low amount of yards. I felt like he wasn't doing that great. He was failing to make moves to make separation. He would have guys that were surrounding him, and he would just try to take them head on like he's Derrick Henry. And that's the problem. He's trying to power through these guys rather than going around. And that's just not very running back smart of him. I think he had a lot of plays where if he just would have bounced out a little or found the hole, I think we're not talking about him being underwhelming. We're talking about overwhelming. But he was failing to do that. He had very poor route running, and I know he's a running back, but man, there were some routes out there that I was watching him run to get a pass, and he looked like he didn't even want to be there. I mean, he started off some routes walking and then jogging to get to the place. It's kind of bad. I was not a big fan, but I will say as the game went on, he improved. He definitely started to look a lot better as the game progressed, and that's going to be something to look forward to in like week 2 and as the season continues. Um, and then for my most impressed one, the one I'm like very impressed and happy with, I got to talk about Jamar Chase, man. Number 5 pick for the Bengals. A lot of people were upset about that. They were like, "Man, you have some really good O linemen on the board, and you know that's what you got to fix." And they went with Jamar Chase, but I think he might have changed some minds. I mean, he had 5 receptions for 101 yards and a touchdown, which averaged out to be 20.2 yards per catch, and that was off of 7 targets. He was making really good moves to get open. I mean, really, really fast off the ball. On his touchdown, which is where his longest catch came from, a 50-yard touchdown. The man was lined up 7 yards off of him, and Jamar Chase had no problem getting around him. I mean, ran a straight go route and burnt him without an issue. A lot of his grabs too. You know, you look at the stats. Like I said, 5 receptions. I think 3 of them were off-target throws, where they're either behind him or in front of, like a little too high in front of him, and he was getting on that somehow and still making plays out of it. Um, that's just something to really look forward to, because you in the draft, you need an O lineman, you pick a receiver, and this man looks elite already to me. I mean, watching his play style and everything, his route running, his speed, his skill, his like catching, I mean, it's all great. It's going to be a huge thing to look forward to. I love Jamar Chase on the Bengals, and yeah, no, I think he was great this week, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved what I saw from Jamar, especially after a really, really shaky preseason. A lot of people were doubting him. But I'm going to just start with my most underwhelming guy, and it's another pass catcher. The guy that went before Jamar Chase, the highest drafted tight end ever, Kyle Pitts, to my Atlanta Falcons. I have no idea where he was in that game. Um, he was this guy. We're talking about probably the most hyped up pass catcher ever out of college. This guy was hyped up to be, come in and take Julio's spot right off the bat, just like that. And what did we see? Absolutely nothing. Okay, uh, he was. I didn't have that sense of, okay, this guy's gonna be out there and he's gonna make something happen. He can make something happen on any given down. Yes, the Falcons as a whole, as a team, had an awful week, but man, if you're drafted 4th overall as the highest tight end ever drafted, you better make some plays, man. It was rough to see him out there, and also he didn't make it any better in the blocking department. Run game started off good, started off really strong actually for Atlanta, but quickly diminished throughout the game. He didn't help with that. You saw Atlanta take him out and put Lee Smith in, and your other blocking, you put in Lee Smith and Hayden Hurst to be your primary tight end blockers there. So, yeah, it was a really, really disappointing debut for him in an awful Atlanta loss. I don't even want to talk about them. Anyway, I'm going to go into my most impressed, and it's a guy that I've been talking about since we started this podcast. Most of you probably know if you've been watching since the beginning. Zach Wilson. I don't care what the stat line says, okay? It didn't flatter him, I'll be honest. It was not a flattering stat line. He only completed 54% of his passes. He only threw for 258 yards. He threw for 2 touchdowns, and he threw a pretty, misfiring pick. I don't know what he saw. But, yeah, I was impressed with Wilson, despite all the unflattering, basic stats that you see on a box score. His offensive line was pretty bad against Carolina. You'd expect that. You had Hassan Reddick and Brian Burns coming off the edge, not to mention Derek Brown, a bus coming through the middle of the offensive line. But Wilson just stayed tall, and he was confident in the entire game. He didn't seem to he wasn't fazed by it didn't seem. He got sacked 6 times, okay? He got hit 10 times. He was pressured countless times. The entire game he was pressured. You didn't have a run game for him. The Jets had only 46 yards or 45 yards combined between the 3 running backs. 2.6 yards a carry. He had no help out there on the run game. And you know what? He put in an excellent game. I thought he was able to extend plays that you wouldn't have gotten from any other quarterback like Sam Darnold. You wouldn't have gotten that from Sam Darnold. He was able to extend plays, make throws out the pocket. He was just, I mean, he looked good. He was, in my opinion, he looked like the best rookie quarterback out there this week, next to maybe Mac Jones. So I was really impressed with him, the, considering everything around him that was bad. Like there was no supporting cast around him. I hope that changes. But man, I was impressed with him. I thought he was really confident today, and or sorry, Sunday. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what he'll do the rest of the season. I think New York has a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, man, I have to agree. I'm a big fan of Zach Wilson after this week, and I will say, proved me a little wrong. I said to you after that first half, look at Wilson, he's not doing too hot, and then you pretty much said, watch this, and he he had an amazing second half. So I am going to be a big supporter for him for the rest of the season. Moving on to our next topic, though, Monday Night Football. It could be the game of the week. In my opinion, it's one of the best games this week so far. One of the best football games I've ever watched. And we saw the Ravens and the Raiders, and me and you, we did our little Monday Night Football little cast where we predicted, and we both picked the Ravens, and the Raiders, I think, shocked the world when they won.
Absolutely.
This Raiders team played really great. So, Alex, my question for you: are the Raiders back, man? Has John Gruden turned it around?
Yeah, so I'm not willing to say any of that just yet. I don't think, I'll be honest with you, and we discussed this before. I don't think Gruden's the answer at all. So obviously that means I don't think he's turned it around. The Raiders, sorry, have gotten a few shock victories over the last, few seasons under Gruden. So it wasn't as surprising as many people probably thought. You're also talking about a Raiders team that the last 2 years they've been playoff contenders by mid-season, and then they've fallen apart. So yeah, this week one game is not enough for me to say anything about the Raiders. It was a fantastic finish for them for sure, and I think they played a full game of football. They played I think they played a more complete game of football than the Ravens did. But yeah, I'm not willing to say Gruden turned it around. But I think there was a lot to talk about with the Ravens too. We did discuss in our podcast on Monday. You mentioned Lamar improving his game, as a passer. And I honestly don't think we saw that. I don't think we saw much of that. In all honesty, he still looked pretty uncomfortable in the pocket, moving around, and trying to, move the ball downfield, keeping his eyes downfield. He tried to. I think he tried to more than he has in the past. But I would account those 3 fumbles that he had to him trying to extend the ball, the play downfield, and him just not seeing the guy open or whatever. And I also don't think that the Ravens put enough of an emphasis on that run game. Tyson Williams started really good. I was really excited for him after that 4th down touchdown run he had. But as the game went on, his role kind of diminished. So I think that was a big mistake for the Ravens. I think the Ravens could have had this game pretty easily if they just would have tweaked what they were doing. So I think it's more on the Ravens than it was to say that the Raiders are back under Gruden.
Alex, I'm gonna agree with most of that, but I really did like this Raiders team. For the question, has John Gruden turned it around? I'm gonna have to say no to that. I think the players have turned it around. I think the players as a whole. I mean, you look at Darren Waller, man. One of the most unstoppable forces this week of football, with 10 receptions, 105 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, he was going deep. He was going short. He was getting open on these good routes. He's got to be the player of the game there. Darren Waller was, going crazy. And then Derek Carr, 34 for 56. A lot of throws they gave him, but he put up 435 yards, only 2 touchdowns and an interception. But I was still very happy with Derek Carr's play style. On top of that, they had 6 receivers with 45 or more yards and had 70 or more yards. So it's not like he was targeting Darren Waller all game. It's not, he was targeting one person. This offense just beat the Ravens without getting Josh Jacobs involved. Josh Jacobs had 40 yards, I think a touchdown. Josh Jacobs, he didn't really do too much. He was not very involved in this game. And for the Raiders offense to keep up with the Ravens offense without getting their star running back involved, I mean, I think that says something really big for this team. And on the defense, how bad their defense was last year, and it really didn't look like it improved too much. We saw better than what I actually expected, but it wasn't that great. I mean, they had 2 sacks, excuse me, 3 sacks on like the fastest quarterback in the league. So I think that's really good. But I mean, you allowed 31 points. You allowed Lamar Jackson to get 80 yards rushing on you and all those passing yards. Really, I wasn't too impressed with that defense. I don't think the Raiders are back, but I do think that the Raiders are going to be a competitive football team moving forward. I will say that before the season started, I had them going 2-15, which was it appears to me is going to be clearly wrong. We might see them fighting for that 7th seed in the AFC, Alex. So yeah, no, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I think as a collective, we said this before. This was easily our favorite game of the week, but we're gonna go on and talk about our separate games. The games that we found to be the most exciting, personally to ourselves. For me, I'm gonna talk about that Kansas City Cleveland game. Man, you're talking about two teams that are easily AFC, contenders to take, go and represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes was absolutely electric. Just as I predicted, he came out there and looked like he had something to prove. Like it was his rookie season. He was just, he was all over the field. He was being Patrick Mahomes. And man, Tyreek Hill, unguardable, 197. He almost had 200 yards. And Mahomes literally was able to just throw it up and throw it in the vicinity of Tyreek Hill, and he would make the play. It was unbelievable. It's like Madden with those two. And then let's talk about Cleveland too. I mean, Cleveland was awesome as well. They were amazing. That run game was incredible. They recorded over 150 yards, 4 touchdowns, just under 6 yards a carry. That run game was just as good as they were last year. Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt carrying the load. Mayfield, he didn't put up an incredible stat line. He threw for a lot of yards, but he didn't get any touchdowns. But he's a leader. I mean, you could tell that all those players under him were they're inspired by him. They love his charisma, they love his swagger, and they play for him. So just an incredible game altogether. Cleveland, they were just short, coming and win and losing that game. They came up just short. Mayfield, we saw the end of the game. If you saw the end of the game, Mayfield was trying to just throw the ball out of bounds and he got hit and it was picked off. So it could have went a different way if that didn't happen. But what an incredible game. You got two teams. We got probably an early preview of the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, no, I definitely love those teams so much. I think one of the big factors in that was just how loud that Kansas City crowd was. I mean, there was times watching at the end of that game where you could barely hear the announcers over them. What I love about that game so much, though, was, that's two of the most complete offenses in the league. But going off of that, two great offenses in the league, let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game. Thursday night football, season opener, my Dallas Cowboys taking on the GOAT, Tom Brady. And I think there was just a very, very explosive offense. Dak Prescott, 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. And then he went 42 for 58. And then you look on the other side, Tom Brady, 32 for 50 with 379 yards and 4 touchdowns with 2 interceptions. These quarterbacks looked absolutely great. The interceptions, I think, were a key factor in that for both of them. But, if you look past that and you actually watch the game, get off the stat sheet, you'll see both these quarterbacks, played amazing, amazing football. CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper were destroying for Dallas. Cooper, 139 yards and 2 touchdowns off of 13 receptions. in my opinion, solidified himself as a top 10 wide receiver in this league right now, if that wasn't already known by people. And then CeeDee Lamb, 7 receptions, 104 yards, and a touchdown, trying his best to make Dallas fans forget that drop he had in that Week 17 game against the Giants last year. I mean, they look plain out unstoppable, but if you look at the Buccaneers receiving core, I mean, come on, Antonio Brown. I mean, it looked like 2017, 2016 Antonio Brown. 121 yards and a touchdown. He was the best receiver on that team. But then you had Chris Godwin, with 105 receiving yards and a touchdown. And then Gronkowski, the man that apparently doesn't age, just like Tom Brady, 90 receptions and 2 touchdowns. I mean, he was playing out unstoppable. I watched that defense try to knock the ball out of his hands so many times, and he just would not let go. He powered through him without a problem, like a tank. I mean, you got to love when you're watching football to watch 2 very explosive offenses. But it wasn't just that. We saw 5 total turnovers this game, and I felt like that was interesting. You know, I like to see the ball change up. I like to see the defense step up. I mean, we saw 2 fumble recoveries by the Cowboys, 2 interceptions by the Cowboys, and an interception by the Bucs. It was a very interesting game. And then on top of that, you know, you had the late score by Dallas that puts them in the lead. And there's a minute left, and, you know, Cowboys fans are thinking they won. I'm sitting there knowing Tom Brady's about to come out, leading an amazing comeback drive down the field, game-winning field goal. I mean, I just felt like that was just an amazing football game. It's still my game of the week. Well, it's still my game of the week. I really enjoyed watching it. I might be a little biased, but no, I thought that game was just absolutely incredible, especially to open up a season. So, yeah. So that's going to bring us to the end of this podcast, Alex. I really enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed this week of football. If you guys enjoyed this video, I'm going to ask you guys to like and subscribe. And if you look in the bio, the description of this video, you can find a link to our Instagram where you can go follow that too. With that being said, guys, I hope you have a great rest of your week. Hope you get ready for Thursday night football. Got the football team. We got the Giants. We'll have a video out for that on our Instagram right before the game. Thank you guys for listening.